Okay. Well, we got one camera.
That's still going.
Yeah.
This is still going.
Okay.
You can kind of see it in the reflection. Turn it back on.
Okay. Yeah.
It's good.
It's recording.
This was fine before, but if I do this, that's what it is.
Oh,
That's really annoying. Okay. Let me see if I have a battery I can just use for the time being.
okay. I guess it's coming loose a bit.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's like
Because the hang, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, 1 second.
I wonder if you could clip it to the tripod.
Yeah, 1 sec. Let me just.
Okay. Yeah.
I just have to jam it in.
Okay. Nice.
Otherwise, everything else is going pretty well.
Good time for a water break.
And we got every 15 minutes or so, I'm just gonna have to check it.
Yeah. That's fine.
Chill. I think it's now going pretty well.
You might need to frame it a bit.
I was doing it a little left so that
Okay.
it's less of the
Yeah.
wall.
Okay.
So it should be good.
Sounds good.
Cool. Mic's still working.
Check.
Check. Yes, sir. Okay.
Good to go.
Right. What is? I think I was asking, like, what
is good?
What does really good peer support look like to you, and how do you like differentiate that with other kinds of support?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. What does really good peer support look like? I think if you're on the receiving end of really good peer support, it makes you feel safe.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel seen. Of course, that's abstract. So, like in practice, as a peer supporter, what does it mean? I think really good peer supporter is really prioritizing the connection and prioritizing the relationship and prioritizing the person's experience and prioritizing that they feel heard and they feel seen. I think sometimes when someone is telling us their story or their journey and they present in a way that maybe is, I don't know, I think it's easy to like mentally go into fix-it mode, even if we don't say it out loud.
Yeah.
Right? I might, as a practitioner, the wheels might be turning for me in my head, thinking about, okay, they said this, so what's the solution here? So it's almost like I'm guiding the conversation to the solution that I'm trying to get at. And I think that sometimes that can be the wrong approach. I think like when I'm acting as a practitioner, I do notice that like fix it, that does pop into my head sometimes. And I'm like, no, let it go. Just listen. Yeah. Just listen, ask exploratory questions, reaffirm, their experiences, be with them, really, and just try to make them really feel understood. Yeah. And heard and seen in those pieces. And again, it sounds so simple. Oh, yeah, all you gotta do is like listen and be active. But a lot of people suck at listening.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
It's endemic, honestly.
Like how many like conflicts have you had with like parents, friends, romantic partners because you felt like they're not hearing you? Yeah. Right? I would guess that the large majority of interpersonal conflicts stem from people not feeling heard and understood by the other person in the conflict.
Yeah.
Almost all conflict. Yeah.
right? So it's like this is not a thing that we all know across the board.
Yeah.
And then sometimes you do have people in your life who are really good at listening and hearing you, and that makes you feel great.
Yeah.
Now imagine that, but on a higher level, because now with peer support, a peer supporter is going to be great at listening times 10,
Yeah.
right? If you're doing it well.
Yeah.
So imagine the kind of safety and like warmth that someone feels in that experience.
Yeah.
So for me, really good peer support is just allowing that person to feel like they are accepted unconditionally.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, people have those people in their lives. Like when I talk about it to people who don't know what peer support is, like I kind of say, you probably have somebody in your life that you will go to with specific types of problems that you have, because you know immediately they will pick up on like what you're feeling, what your like experience has been, and understand that in you, versus other people who might not understand you in the same way will misunderstand. It'll take a lot longer for you to explain what you're feeling, and it'll feel like not necessarily a chore, but it'll feel like an uphill battle getting somebody to understand you. And like my understanding of a good peer supporter is they can be that really good person for like a lot of different people.
That's it right there. And I was gonna bring it up because you're describing at first in your example, you were describing like personal relationships.
Yeah.
And it might take a while for someone to understand you on that level.
Yeah.
And to make you feel safe in that way. A really good peer supporter is going to have the skills to create that level of rapport. You know, if you're like really good in like the first session.
Yeah.
Right. But if, probably within the first 3 sessions, but, I've definitely seen and been around people who can do that in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just incredible to watch. It's wild.
Yeah.
It's like watching a master at work at this is just, it's
impressive.
Yeah. It's hard to describe. You just have to see it.
Yeah.
How like someone could come in and be completely closed off. Like, someone needing help can come in and be closed off. And then within 15 minutes, they just open.
Yeah.
And they volunteer that openness. Like, it's not because anyone's prying.
Right. It's not forced. It's like they now realize that this can be like a safe place to share.
And that's it.
Just huge for people.
Right.
I'm just gonna check this.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool.
Sick.
Like on that note of like very impressive peer supporters being able to build rapport with people and making people feel safe through like shared understanding, or like even just showing that they understand in a different way from a lot of people. Like how would you compare like that level of understanding to things like traditional counseling? Because I've had experiences with counselors and therapists where I go to 1 or 2 sessions, and even at the end I feel like, okay, we're not really talking the same language right now. I know that on some intellectual level they understand like what I'm talking about and will give some ways to improve, like the problem solving mentality you said. But then even at the end of it, it just doesn't feel like anybody understands. And like, why do you think, like, do you think there's a specific type of person who benefits from that versus like peer support? Or do you think everybody would benefit? Like, if you had like an archetype of somebody who you think, okay, you would really benefit from going to peer support, if you're having mental health issues or struggles, like who would that be?
I think that's a great question. I think the folks who might best benefit from peer support are people whose challenges are almost like beyond the clinical. There's like a social aspect to it.
Yep.
Right. And those things usually go hand in hand, but every so often you meet a person who has mental health challenges or a mental illness where they're actually really just trying to treat the symptoms, the observable stuff, and not necessarily the other parts of building a life. you know, maybe they already have a pretty, you know, fulfilled life in the sense of, you know, they're a professional and they have a partner and maybe they have children or friends, or, you know, they sort of have a life built already.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, something just came up out of the blue for them and they're just trying to sort that out.
Yep.
I think with peer support, what is sometimes lacking for someone who would really benefit from peer support is this hope that my life can be normal.
Right.
The hope that I can be normal or my life can be normal. And I think for folks who are really struggling with that part, peer support is really helpful.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. Yeah, because somebody in the first case knows what normal is like and like has been there and is comfortable like seeing that in their future, versus a lot of people, whether it be like societal or cultural like struggles added on to mental health, like that makes it a lot harder to envision a future where like things can be steady, right? So.
Absolutely. And like when I was at the beginning of my journey, I just wanted to meet other people who had a similar like story or experience and outlook, who are doing well, to be like, oh, I can be like the me that I am now and still be okay.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you can't get that from a therapist because they're not allowed to disclose.
Yeah, because they can't talk. Yeah, they can't say anything like that, right? It's trained in them not to, like, specifically.
They will get in trouble.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, yeah. Do you think that's like something that should change, or do you think that's a good boundary? Where like,
I personally, you know, it's funny because I almost went to like, you know, my ethicals, and like ethics is an interesting conversation. I look at ethics like the law, in the sense of when we think about the law, you know, we grow up with this framework of the law is right or wrong and tells us what right or wrong is. But when you dive deeper into the law, it's really an agreement made by people who have power to enforce the agreement.
Yeah.
Right. So when we look at ethics, I mean, of course there are some things within ethics that are, you just can't like argue.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, don't sleep with your patients. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there are some things like just inarguable, right? But I think that the part around sharing of self, I think that's a bit more of a gray area. I think that there should be some barriers in terms of sharing of self, because that actually can present, like, I wouldn't give somebody my address or where I live or invite them to my home or anything like that, right? Because that's a liability and a risk for everybody involved in that situation. But, you know, if I'm working with somebody, I don't think it would be overstepping a boundary to talk a little bit about, like, my family structure, in the sense of like, I might have this many siblings, or you know, or I grew up in this kind of social context, you know, because I think that could add, you know, value to the rapport that you're building. Right? It doesn't mean I'm going to tell you, you know, the names of my siblings and the street that I grew up on, right? But it at least paints a picture of the person you're talking to. And I think that can be really important when you're trying to create that rapport and connection, and that person needs to see you as someone that they can believe in order for them to receive the maximum benefit from the relationship.
100%. Humanizes them, right?
But think about, like, every teacher that you've like had in your life that's been a really good teacher. What was it that made them a really good teacher?
Like being genuine, like, I think passion as well. If you can see it in somebody, like, you know, this person likes what they're teaching, but like, to me, that's part of being genuine. Is like showing your, like, being yourself, showing who you are to other people, and like not hiding anything. You can people can tell. I mean, we've had conversations like this where like you can tell when somebody's being genuine, like whether it be on a video, like in person, whatever. You can tell like if somebody's kind of being a little bit fake or not showing their true self. Even if you can't really pinpoint exactly what it is. You
know when someone is working from a manual, or when they're being themselves.
Oh, that's a huge thing for so many people I've talked to, which is like, I've gone to therapy and they like gave me a checklist, and then they gave me like a sheet of paper to take home. This has happened to me too, where I got a sheet of paper at the end of a session. And
some people actually like that.
Yeah.
But most people don't, as far as like my experience with it.
Yeah. But the thing is, it's like, I think a lot of people would be okay with doing that if you like built a relationship with who you were talking to, and they checked with you to see, hey, is this something that helps you or has helped you in the past? Is this what you're looking for? Is this not what you're looking for? But a lot of people just, get handed a piece, like get handed something, and they're like, what do I do with this? I didn't want this. So
you talk for 40 minutes, and it's like, here's this piece of paper, do this, and come back next week, and we'll talk about it. And it's like, that's weird.
That's weird. Like, I don't know if this is the homework I wanted. Like, maybe we can get there, but anyways, like the genuine part of it makes, I don't know. That's when you can have like a good teacher, somebody who you trust, somebody who you're actually going to take advice from. Because if you feel like they're doing it from some like other place, or like, out of just like following the book, or like, anything like that, usually, at least in my experience, I won't do it. So
yeah. Or you'll kind of do it out of obligation.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm just gonna restart this.
Yeah. Good.
Yep. Yeah, it's just the 15-minute timer. Let me
Okay.
check the other ones, because it just makes sure the file size isn't too big. Oh.
Okay.
Mine was off. This might have been the same thing. And I'll just do it with this one too. This one was good the whole time.
Cool.
And honestly, like, this camera view being wide is like, it can be cut into whichever shot.
Exactly.
So like, that's pretty chill.
Yeah. Throw some B-roll in there,
Yeah, no, literally. I was thinking that we can get some nice, like, nature shots, or like people talking to each other. Just, like, to splice over.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you about you're talking just now about trust.
Yeah.
What makes you trust somebody?
What makes me trust somebody? Let me think about that.
Like, where does trust come from in a relationship? Not like in a romantic relationship. But
sure. Yeah. I think trust hand in hand goes with, like, I don't want to say necessarily sacrifice, but like, I think the people I trust the most are the ones I can also depend on for like other things. Like, I don't know if this makes sense. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's the same thing, dependability and trust. But to me, it's like, if I'm able to be vulnerable with somebody, and I know that like they kind of understand who I am and like where I'm coming with things, and will take that information and like not use it for themselves in any ways, like those are people I end up opening up to more. Or if I can see that in somebody before I even open up to them, that's like something that'll make me trust them. Because I think there's certain people who I meet and immediately I feel like they are trustworthy, but I don't know if I could pinpoint exactly what it is. Maybe it's being genuine, and like you can kind of sense that, but maybe it's like shared connection and like feeling like they are similar enough to me in the way that they think or the way that they act that like I would be comfortable sharing more with them. But yeah, I don't know if that, like, to me that was like a circular answer, but what is your thought?
Yeah, I'm thinking now about all my relationships with the people I trust the most, and for me it's when I can be vulnerable and share a piece of myself that I might be ashamed of or others might rebuke, and they're like, okay.
Yeah.
They just like accept it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change. Yeah. And it doesn't change like how they view me. Right. They might, be like, well, let's explore that more. But it's not like they're trying to criticize me or make me feel worse about it or do anything that makes me feel smaller. It's more about helping me to understand the thing. If I'm like sharing like some trauma or something like that, they're not gonna like cringe and kind of like change the conversation in a way that puts emotional distance between the subject I'm discussing and whatever's happening in the space. It's more of like, just, wow, that happened. How did that make you feel? What was the impact on your life? How did that show up for you?
Yeah.
And when people respond like that, you're like, wow, I can tell this person anything,
Yeah.
and they're with me.
Yep. I feel like it's like part of it is being really open, like open to, you know, new experiences, new thoughts, like not being too rigid in like the way that you think and like your ideals and things like that. Like those types of people are the ones who won't cringe or shy back when you say something maybe uncomfortable. Like that would
Mhm.
make a lot of other people do that. And like being open to like new ways of thinking or just like different, like people that think differently from you or do different things than you, just like actions, whatever it might be. Like those are people who you're willing to tell more because like, you know, they'll like think about what you're talking about and not just immediately say, oh, okay, stop right there, buddy. Like,
Doesn't feel good, you know what I mean?
no, it doesn't. Because yeah, it just goes back to like, oh, like you don't really understand where I'm coming from. Like, how can I share more now? So,
Exactly.
yeah. And do you think, like in terms of sharing more, like we've talked about stories a lot, and like you've
Mhm.
mentioned it a few times, like sharing your story with people, and like, what do you think is powerful about stories to you?
I think stories are bridges between people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you ever like sat on a train or like an airplane or in a bar or something like that and you just meet a random person, and at first you're like, you have no opinion of this person. Maybe you're a little annoyed that they started talking to
Yeah.
you. You know what I mean? And then they share their story with you, or you share your story with them, or this like story exchange happens, and all of a sudden you feel closer because there is something that resonates between the two of you based on the stories that you're sharing. So now there's this invisible bridge between you that you can walk across and create a relationship in the middle.
Yeah.
I think that's what story is for me in terms of why it's powerful and why it's so useful.
Yeah. I think, and there's also a part of, you know, the narrative part of the story that you tell yourself is like how you feel about yourself, and being able to, you know, rewrite stories about yourself or help others rewrite stories about themselves is like a huge way to change thinking or change behavior or like help people through struggles. Yeah, so I think,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I did a workshop on that a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, reimagining your story.
Yeah, and what's the like like overall, like what do you think is a, I don't know, powerful part of teaching that to people?
I'll put it like this. You know, when I was a kid growing up, I was really into music.
Yeah.
And so me and my best friend, we'd mess around and try to like write songs, and we thought we'd be like the next like boy group kind of thing. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah.
And then I'd like try singing at home, and because I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have any training.
Yeah.
As a kid, my family would be like, "Yo, you suck. Like, you can't sing. You have no voice or aptitude for this thing."
Yeah.
Right? And then this morning, you know, or recently, I've actually started to like revisit this singing thing, and I've learned that I can turn a tune. I just didn't have the technique before.
Sure.
The breathing, and you know, like the shape of your mouth when the air is coming out, like all these like technical aspects of it, I just didn't understand. And so this morning, I'm in a room full of toddlers at a daycare, and I'm singing like the songs. And of course, yeah, they're gonna be into the songs just because they like the songs, but you can see them vibing, kind of like,
Yeah.
you know. So it's not just like they're like singing the songs,
Yeah,
but they're like
yeah.
vibing, right? And then even recently, sometimes I'm like being a bit more open with it. So I'll be
Yeah.
like in my car, and like my friends will be in my car with me, and I'll be like singing the songs. They're like, "Yo, you sound good,"
Nice.
right? But I spent 95% of my life just being afraid to sing in front of people
Yeah.
because of the story I told myself about my ability or inability to sing. And that was a story that someone else told me
Yeah. Yeah.
when I was a kid, and that became my story,
Yeah.
right? So changing the story now has me thinking that, you know, I'm not saying I'm going to go out there and, you know, turn into Barry White tomorrow and start singing.
But the story is not, I'm not a singer anymore. Is that
Exactly. And now I feel comfortable doing karaoke, you know? Right?
Yeah.
But, you know, or like there's so many, like, another good example of that for me is that when I was growing up, particularly in high school, when I was experiencing pretty severe depression and anxiety, I sort of shrunk into myself and became isolated. And the story around me became, oh, he's quiet, he's stoic, he's introverted.
Yeah.
And I started to believe that story because even my behavior fit that story. That's what other people were seeing. But of course, once I, you know, walked my journey a bit and had some different experiences and, you know, things that literally put me on a stage, and I am the exact opposite of a quiet person.
Yeah.
I'm not like literally the personality test has changed for me, where it used to say introverted, now it's now it says extroverted. And you know what really helped was me deciding I wanted to change the story for myself. It wasn't even that someone else changed the story for me.
Yep.
I woke up one day and said, who do I want to be? And I started giving myself a different story.
Yeah.
And by giving myself a different story, I gave myself different behaviors and then a different reality.
Yeah.
So the story that you tell yourself is super important.
Yeah. 100%. Somebody was maybe.
Yeah, I heard
hovering
some
on the
creaking,
door.
but
I just want to make sure that they are
not blocked in. Yeah. Yeah, 5, yeah. This is good, man.
Yeah, I like this.
I think there's going to be some good material to work with.
I agree. Like, I think
I'd hate to be the person editing all this stuff, but you know.
it's fine. I'll be doing it. I mean, I'm not working full time.
Yeah, no, I do a hell of a lot of video editing these days too. So.
Do you? Yeah, I just like torrent my software. And, like, it's kind of jank, but
Yeah.
I've done a lot in the past, which is kind of funny.
Nice.
Just speak for a sec into the mic.
Yeah. Check. 1, 2.
Okay. I
Yeah.
think that seems like it'll be good. Actually, before we forget, let's see if there's anything on this list that seems really cool. So this is more about like content creation.
Mm-hmm.
Social media is an interesting one.
It is.
Things specifically in Canada. This one's interesting. What's the craziest misconception about mental health you've heard? Let's talk about like social media. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah.
That could be an interesting one. So like, I don't know. I think everybody has a take on like, oh, social media is like ruining all our kids and like
I think
high
that's
school and stuff.
ridiculous.
Yeah. Like what?
I'm for social media, and I'm not even like a person who like is on social media heavily. I use social media to learn.
Yeah.
Like social media has been a tremendous learning resource for me. I know that there is science that states that the comparison between, you know, for instance, my regular life and someone else's highlight reel might cause uncomfortable feelings for me. I'm not discounting that as being true, but I think that's if you're using social media passively. And I think now that we know that, it gives us the information to not fall into that trap.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
But there have been so many resources and strategies and people that I've come in contact with on social media that have literally transformed my entire life and have been directly responsible for a change that has made my life infinitely better. So I'm a huge proponent of social media.
Yeah. And do you think you are an outlier in terms of having a mostly like positive trajectory or whatever it might
My
be.
algorithm.
Yeah, I don't know what it like. Do you think that's a rare thing to have happen?
No, I
to
don't.
you?
Among again, I think if you're being intentional with it, like I think it matters in the sense of, and I think this is why the conversations outside the social media space need to change in terms of how we talk to young people
Right.
and what we support young people in working through and working with, and what learning we're like. And I guess because I've worked with so many young people before, a big thing that I focus on when working with young people is self-awareness.
Right.
And self-awareness from the standpoint of understanding that the outside world is a stimulus and my brain is a filter. And that filter is in large part calibrated to my experience and the environment I grew up in. Right? And once we understand that, we can examine the filter.
Sure.
And then decide how we want to filter the information that we are coming into contact with, whether it's walking down the street or whether it's when we're looking at our phone.
Sure.
Right? So if we teach people, young people, not young people, how to examine their filter, and that the filter that you've inherited through your, genetics, your family situation when you're growing up, whether or not you were bullied in school, whether or not you had the luck of good teachers or the misfortune of bad teachers.
Yeah.
When you start to realize that all of those things that are on the outside have built this filter for you, you're like, oh, I can change my filter. and then that changes how you interact with everything, including social media.
Yeah.
And then you start to be more intentional with something like social media. And so if you're getting, if you're seeing someone else's highlight reel, you're understanding that's just a highlight reel. And or if you're getting other things coming up on your algorithm that maybe aren't helpful for you, you can recognize that those things are not helpful for you, and then sort of intentionally gravitate or move toward things that
Sure.
will be more helpful for you.
Yeah. And do you like, how does somebody start being self-aware about things like that? Because I would guess that you and I are probably decently self-aware about things like that, because I do similar things where like I will intentionally gravitate towards positive things and like make sure I say not interested on things I know that are gonna be bad for me, right? But like some people, like, how do you identify in the first place? Like,
I think you have to pay attention to your feelings.
yeah.
And a lot of people talk about meditation and mindfulness, and they think meditation is going to like bring you to nirvana, when really it's just about paying attention.
Sure.
Right? So when you're better at paying attention to how you feel, you can understand when your discomfort is happening. And then if when you become uncomfortable in the moment it happens, then you can start to put together patterns of what are the stimuli in the world that are making me feel this uncomfortable feeling. And then once you discern that pattern, you're able to pinpoint, maybe this is the thing that's making me uncomfortable.
Right.
So maybe I need to change that.
Right. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that does apply to social media, right? Like anything like that, being able to just understand when something might be bad for you to just look at 24 hours a day, like you can get away from it.
But I think the caveat to my own argument is that you also need a reference point.
Sure.
And if you've had a difficult life and trauma and mental illness, and that's been the majority of your life, your reference point might be a little out of whack.
Sure.
Right? So, another thing that we want to give people when we're supporting them is a positive reference point, so that they can start to compare the discomfort that they might be feeling almost all the time to something that feels way better than that.
Sure.
And then once they experience what that way better can feel like, they start to understand that that is a goal they can work toward. And the things that make them feel not that way are maybe some things they can work on eliminating or modifying in their life.
Yeah. Do you think that's part of a job of a peer supporter to help people understand?
I think anybody in the helping profession.
Yeah.
I think peer supporters are quite good at it.
Yeah.
You know? But I think that if we are in any sort of social service, medical, healthcare, helping profession, that a thing that we should be trying to do is give someone a different reference point as to what feeling good can be.
Sure. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right? It's like it's easy to normalize a bad situation if that's the only situation you've ever had. You know, like I didn't know what a good relationship was. Like now I'm talking about romantic relationships.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a good romantic relationship was for a long time until I had someone who made me truly feel special and seen. And then I looked at some of the other people I dated before then, and I was like, I thought that those were people who were good for me, but actually they were not necessarily what I wanted or needed. I just didn't know because my reference point of what something really good can be like just didn't exist yet.
Right. You don't have your 10 isn't set right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
So
that's great. And do you think we talked about it a bit earlier, but like how much can other people help you set that versus just having to experience it?
I think there's a little overlap there in the sense of like a person can help you reset your reference point by being a good experience for you.
Okay, I see. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I don't know, not to delve too much into my own story, but I thought that I was told a lot when I was a kid that I was too sensitive and I took things too personally. So I grew up with this story that I was too sensitive and I took things too personally. But actually what was happening is I was living in an environment where I was just being insulted all the time. Right?
How can you not be sensitive about that?
Exactly. I'm actually not someone who takes things very personally in actuality. But I did because there were a lot of things to take personally.
Sure.
But once my world opened up and I started to meet people who were more positively affirming in my life, I realized that, well, that was actually the thing that changed my reference point. And then, all of a sudden you don't want to go into those environments anymore that made you feel like you were being insulted.
Right.
And so you choose the other environment that affirms you more. And all of a sudden your perception of yourself and the world changes, And I think even all that you could, again, extend to the social media conversation, right? So everything is just about like, expanding the breadth of like experience for people, I think.
And understanding yourself better.
Yeah. But it's not a thing that most people are going to grasp naturally.
Right. Yeah.
You need to learn it. It has to be taught to you and it has to be shown to you.
And I think you have to want to learn it.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that means, some event shakes them hard and then you go looking. But yeah, let me just check.
Yeah. I think next time maybe we should get like more opaque things.
Sure.
So that visual consistency in the
Oh
edit.
yeah. Oh yeah, that's a classic reality show.
Yeah,
Like-
exactly. I look for that all the time.
I do too, actually. No, that's smart. Yeah, well, if it's vertical, hopefully they're out of the shot.
Yeah.
But let's.
I think we got some good stuff here,
I
man.
do too. Do you wanna keep going until the?
What time do we got?
Because I can clean up, so you can just go. It's 4:44.
Yeah, I should probably like just start getting ready. Maybe like one more for like 5 minutes,
Sure.
and then.
Oh shit! I forgot to call Joe. I think he'll be okay.
Okay,
Um.
we're gonna like see like 12 text messages in the group.
Yeah. You always bring up hope in your talks.
Yes.
How
I
do you stay hopeful when things get rough?
Oh man. Hope is such an interesting thing. How do I stay hopeful when things get rough? I think it's having an example of. I think a couple things immediately come to mind for me, and it's a reference point that things actually have been better. And I think the beauty of life is that it's kind of like a wave. It goes up and down. And if you've experienced downs and ups, when you're in a down, you know an up is possible. So I think that gives me hope during rough times. I think the other thing is actually having an external example of what that hope can look like. The first one that really, really impacted me in my life was reading the autobiography of a man named Antoine Fisher. I think his book is called Finding Fish. It's about himself. It's about, well, it's autobiography.
Yeah.
And it's about this black man in America who grew up in an abusive situation. And as a kid, he felt very isolated. He felt weird. He felt socially awkward. He didn't really have a lot of connections with peers his own age. The only people he really got along with were adults. And that was me as a kid, you know, minus like the serious abuse part. But all those other pieces really fit for me, where I did feel socially awkward. I did feel alone and isolated. I did have trouble connecting to my peers, and I was much better at connecting with adults. And I wondered if I would ever like be normal or like have normal social relationships, or, you know, the thing that would always come into my head when I was a kid was, would I ever be able to get married and have a family and have friends? That was what I wanted. I wanted that more than riches. I wanted that more than fame.
Yeah.
Or success, how we typically define success. I just wanted to have a safe relationship and a family and friends and community. That's all I wanted. And I didn't think it was possible for me until I read this book, where this guy who was very similar to me in a lot of ways, eventually in his adulthood was able to meet a mentor, someone you might even call a peer supporter, who was a beacon of hope for him, which then allowed him to really find himself and to have the courage to find himself, because I think it does take courage. And then the story kind of ends with him meeting the person who becomes his wife, and then, you know, it's kind of happily ever after that.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, so this guy can go through not just what I'm going through, but worse, and still be okay.
Yeah.
And that's where, you know, my hope came from. So
I think that's great.
yeah.
And I think it's like the power of having not even just a mentor. Like, this is a book, right? Like any sort of...
I didn't even know this person.
Yeah, any sort of reference that can say somebody similar to me can come out in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
And like, yeah, it can be a book. It can be music. I know a lot of people find that in music, any form of art, media, whatever it is.
There was definitely a lot of that for me.
Yeah.
Like the reason I gravitated toward rap music so much, because I grew up listening to all kinds of music.
Yeah.
You know, I remember like pop music, rock music, you name it, dance music. I listened to everything. And then when I became a teenager, I gravitated to rap music. And the rap music I gravitated toward were more, they were kind of like storytelling, like this is what it's like to live in the projects,
Right.
kind of things, because that described the reality I was dealing with, where I was in a situation where I was trying to be a good kid. I had all this temptation around me, all this, for lack of a better term, depression around me, things that people would, from the outside looking in, would seem, they would say it's dangerous, or, you know, just not the kind of behavior you would want to grow up to be around.
Right.
You know, there was like the police brutality, there was the homelessness, there was the racism, there was the not getting to eat healthy meals every day. And rap music talked a lot about that, but also talked about getting out of that.
Right.
And I really gravitated toward that as well. So yeah, you know, hope can come from a lot of places.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So
I feel like that's a good place to end.
yeah,
I feel
I'm
like
good, man.
Yeah, and
You
like,
know.
I don't know. It's always nice talking. Like,
Yeah, man, I love it, man. This
and
is
I
the best
love
way to
how-
spend my Friday.
Yeah, and I think we can keep doing this. Like,
Absolutely.
it can keep working. So, I think this will be a good.
If anything, we're just
Point.
documenting the journey.
Yeah, exactly.